All right, let's talk about Bangladesh. You've probably heard the headlines. It's one of South Asia's fastest growing economies, a real success story. But there's a catch. Behind all that incredible growth, there's a puzzle, a paradox that has global investors scratching their heads. So today, we're going to dig into this story of immense promise and a much, much more complicated reality. So, first up, let's look at the promise. For more than a decade now, Bangladesh has been pulling off an average annual GDP growth of over 6%. I mean, think about that for a second. That is some serious sustained economic momentum. It's the kind of growth most countries can only dream of, and it's a huge signal that this is a nation on the move. So, what's fueling all that growth? Well, it really comes down to one thing: people. We're talking about nearly 170 million of them, and get this, the median age is just 26. So this isn't just a big population, it's a super young, dynamic workforce that's creating this absolutely massive, booming domestic market. So put that in perspective, it's on track to be the ninth largest consumer market in the entire world by 2030. That's huge. Okay, so you've got this incredible growth story, you've got this demographic firepower. It's like the perfect recipe, right? You'd expect foreign money to be just flooding into the country. But here's the thing, it's not. So what on earth is holding foreign investors back? That's the paradox we're going to unpack right now. All right, let's dive into the first part of this puzzle, the numbers. Let's really look at the gap between that impressive growth and the actual foreign dollars coming in. You know, sometimes the best way to see what's going on is a simple comparison. So in 2024, let's look at neighboring India. They attracted over $27 billion in foreign direct investment. Now look at Bangladesh. Despite all that high growth, they only pulled in about $1.3 billion. That gap is just massive, and it really shows you the scale of the puzzle we're talking about. And when you dig a little deeper, the story gets even more complicated. The small increases in foreign investment we have seen, they're not really from new companies setting up shop. For the most part, it's just the companies already there reinvesting their profits, partly because it can be tricky to get that money out of the country. That means those brand new projects, what we call greenfield investments, the kind that really signal fresh confidence from the outside world, well, they're pretty rare. So here it is, laid out side by side. You've got these two completely different stories about Bangladesh. On one side, you have the promise, right? The incredible growth, that massive consumer market. But on the other side, you've got the tough reality. Foreign direct investment is a tiny part of its economy. The inflows are actually going down. And yeah, it has a reputation for being a really tough place to do business. This is the central conflict, the core tension of the whole story. Okay, so if new money isn't really flowing in, then where is the money that's already there? Who is actually investing in Bangladesh right now? Let's take a look at the key sectors, the main countries, and some of the big companies that are on the ground. And, well, it's probably no big surprise where the investment is concentrated. The total amount of foreign investment already in the country, what's called the FDI stock, is mostly in a few key areas. Textiles and apparel, which is the engine of the country's exports, that's almost a quarter of the total. Then you've got banking, power, and telecoms. So yeah, just a handful of sectors really make up the lion's share of all foreign investment. So who's writing the checks? Well, the United Kingdom is actually at the top of the list, with about 17% of all investment, which makes sense given the historical ties. After the UK, you see a mix of major players from East Asia, think Singapore and South Korea, and a few other European nations rounding out the list. Okay, let's put some familiar names to these numbers to make it more real. You've got major companies operating in Bangladesh. For instance, the American energy giant Chevron. They're the single biggest U.S. investor there. In the telecom space, you've got Norway's Telenor, which is behind the huge local provider Grameenphone. And of course, in consumer goods, you see giants like Unilever and British American Tobacco. These are the big established players who've been there for a while. All right, now we get to the most important part of this whole thing. We've seen the what and the who, so let's get into the why. Why aren't more big companies jumping in? We're about to dive into the major roadblocks that are keeping all that potential investment on the sidelines. And let's not beat around the bush here. This quote from a U.S. State Department report is about as blunt as it gets. It straight up says that corruption is a major obstacle to foreign investment. So we're not just talking about a perception or a rumor. This is a formally recognized massive barrier. But you know what? Corruption is really just the tip of the iceberg. When you talk to people in the business community, they consistently point to this whole wall of other problems. Things like frustrating bureaucracy and red tape, infrastructure that you just can't rely on, major headaches trying to acquire land, and a whole lot of uncertainty around the rules, especially when it comes to the simple act of trying to send your profits back home. Let's just focus on that red tape issue for a second. I want you to just imagine this. You're trying to get a new project approved, but you're dealing with a bunch of different ministries. Their procedures all overlap, and there's absolutely no transparency. The whole process is so slow and so confusing that, honestly, a lot of potential investors just throw their hands up and walk away. Okay, but the story doesn't just end with all the problems. That would be pretty bleak. The good news is the government of Bangladesh knows about these hurdles, and they've actually started to push for some real positive change. So let's switch gears and look at the recent reforms they're putting in place to try and fix these issues. And look, this isn't just talk. We're seeing actual concrete action. This timeline here shows some real momentum. I mean, just in the last couple of years, they've made it easier to deal with foreign currency, they've passed a new banking law specifically to help non-residents, and they're bringing in huge tax exemptions for important sectors like renewable energy. These are real, tangible steps forward. So what's really clear here is that there's a strategy with a few different parts. They're tackling the financial rules, they're offering big tax breaks and other incentives, they're trying to streamline all that bureaucracy with a one-stop service to speed things up, and maybe most importantly, they are pouring a ton of money into upgrading the country's basic infrastructure. The power, the ports, the roads. It's a really comprehensive game plan. So where does all of this leave us? Well, when you weigh that incredible potential against all these stubborn challenges, what you really see is an economy at a major crossroads. It's facing this critical turning point that's absolutely going to define its future. You know, there's a term that perfectly describes where Bangladesh is right now, an investment frontier. Think about it. It has all that high growth potential that gets investors really excited, but it's not quite a mainstream go-to destination yet because of all those very real risks and challenges we've been talking about. So ultimately, it really does come down to this. The country is standing at a crossroads with two very different paths ahead. One path leads to it finally cashing in on its amazing potential, fueled by that foreign investment it needs. But the other path, well, that's where it gets stuck, bogged down by the same old problems, with all that incredible promise just remaining out of reach. And so we end right back where we started, with a big question. With all its promise and all its problems, can Bangladesh pull this off? Can it successfully push through these reforms, overcome its challenges, and finally make that leap from an investment frontier to a mainstream global investment destination? Really, only time will tell, and the next few years are going to be absolutely critical.